In today's video I am going to react or debunking some claims a Gojo fan seems to have on my technique target video. This Gojo fan made a few arguments, so let's begin with the first. Argument 1. Extension technique is literally a new move of your technique, and technique target has no connection with extension technique. Extended technique target means is your technique now as a wider list of targets it can interact with, and extension technique are simply further application of technique. If we use Sukuna and nanami as examples, your argument falls apart badly. Nanami's ratio technique collapse is an extension technique, right? It's created after learning more about his technique, but which part did he extend on? Well, his technique's target, obviously. By figuring out his technique also applies itself to non-living beings, he then develops collapse. For Sukuna, his dismantle can set things around him as the technique target, but by seeing what Maharaga targets to cut through infinity and also targeting it, Sukuna expands his target as dismantle now target things in the space around him plus space itself, aka targeting all of existence. This development gave birth to the extension technique called world dismantle. The difference between Nanami and Sukuna was that Sukuna already fully knew what his technique was capable of doing, and he just left the figuring out part to Maharaga. So yes, extended technique target can have relation to extension technique, but not all extension techniques are results of you extending your technique target. If Mahito had continued to grow, his technique would have had an extended/wider technique target by manipulating souls in living and non-living beings. Then he would likely develop extension techniques that represent that. Argument 2. Gojo in Chapter 76 is doing the same things as Nanami. What Gojo did in Chapter 76 wasn't the same as what Nanami or Sukuna did by having a wider technique target. If Gojo was able to apply his spatial technique to souls like UI, then I would agree with you that Gojo was extending his technique target. What you must understand is the context technique target is being used. What Gojo did in Chapter 76 was choose the object he was going to manipulate by applying limitless at the space where the object exists. The technique target was still space, but Gojo chose what space to manipulate after deciding which object posed the most threat. The one identifying the threat by the amount of curse energy, shape, speed and size was Gojo himself, not limitless. Gojo just automated the process, thus allowing him to now leave infinity on always. Now that I've debunked your claims, the rest of your example doesn't debunk my claim or add to yours. Your Yuki example. Yes, Yuki technique target is mass as it manipulates the user's mass by adding virtual mass. Yes, her extension technique had a high output, but all you prove was that unlike Sukuna or Nanami, hers didn't involve changing your technique target. Your Asian curse example, again, didn't prove anything, and yes, this curse spirit technique target is concept. Your Kenny example. Yes, Kenny was commenting on how dismantle bypass infinity, and this doesn't disprove nothing. Argument 3, you say limitless can target souls. Well, I said no, but that was in context of limitless by itself, not when it's imbued plus altered by his domain. Limitless by itself hasn't shown the ability to target souls, nor does its target technique extend to affects the souls in the space around him, even though he can see souls. Unlike Gojo, Maki can see souls, so when given a technique that can interact with souls, she was able to affect them. The only spatial curse technique that has an extended target is UI. He targets the space of objects and souls. So yes, Gojo can't affect souls, and just like how Maki can see souls but only cut Sukuna's soul, not Megumi's, Gojo could do the same if he could. Argument 4. Sukuna is copying everything Gojo does. Well, the answer is no. Most poses were from the hidden inventory arc, which Sukuna doesn't know about, thus were just the writer recreating his best poses. The other was the writer referencing the anime, and the only time Sukuna ever in universe copied Gojo, after he died, was using Gojo's hand sign. But he copied Gojo's healing technique burnout, Yes, and he did the same to Choso's technique application and Maharaga's slap. Argument 5. Your point about Sukuna's soul attack clearly shows you didn't watch the video properly. Again, Sukuna is choosing anything around him as the target for his dismantle, then he releases the slash in that direction to cut said target. Sukuna is capable of targeting space because that's how dismantle works, and also why he can't target space with Fuga, just like how Yuji can't target souls with blood manipulation. Argument 6. Sukuna needed a binding vow to use an open barrier domain, while Kenjaku didn't. Now let's explain why you are incorrect. In Chapter 119, it is stated that Sukuna is able to manifest his domain without need for a barrier. Not only that, but a binding vow is also formed because its barrier is open and people have the ability to leave. What the manga explained was that a binding vow is formed due to the nature of the barrier being open. This means the binding vow wasn't done by the user, and all open barriers have this binding vow because all of them have an escape route. Then why wasn't Kenjaku's range as large as Sukuna's? Sukuna has a larger sure hit range because Sukuna has a higher curse energy volume and output than Kenjaku. Whether Sukuna's domain binding vow range buff relies solely on Sukuna's curse energy output and just represents his ability to freely manipulate his range without worrying about barrier quality dropping, or if it operates like Kokichi Muta own binding vow that allows for wider range beyond your CE output doesn't matter because Sukuna would have wider range than Kenjaku due to his high curse energy amount and curse energy output. Argument 7. How world dismantle works. After rereading, I agree with this person's interpretation and yours if this was what you're trying to say. Sukuna likely needed hand signs to activate due to difficulty trying to activate it without. That's why he stated it was almost impossible to pull off. Sukuna later added a binding vow increasing the conditions, meaning Sukuna likely won't be able to omit these conditions for its activation due to that vow making it a permanent condition for activation. This is the end of the video. I hope you enjoy it. Remember, this is my interpretation of the manga and future facts might prove me wrong.